Extremely rich billionaires who live like they are poor don't clip coupons because they forgot they're wealthy. They do it because frugality becomes identity at extreme wealth levels. These are people worth billions, flying commercial and living in modest homes while fortunes compound invisibly. To understand how billionaires live like they're broke, we need to examine those who made frugality their philosophy. And it starts with a man who monitors office electricity like every kilowatt costs him millions. 10. The economy seat philanthropist. Azim Premji built Wipro into one of India's largest technology companies, amassing a personal fortune exceeding $9 billion in the process. He flies economy class, internationally, on 12-hour flights where first-class tickets cost less than what his net worth increases during the flight. He monitors office electricity like it's his last rupee. It's not. Premji's frugality isn't accidental or performative. It's embedded in how he operates. Employees report that he personally reviews electricity bills for Wipro offices, questioning spikes in usage and pushing for energy efficiency measures that save thousands of dollars annually. For a man whose wealth increases by millions daily through market appreciation and business returns, obsessing over utility costs seems absurd until you understand that for Premji, frugality is philosophy, not necessity. He drives a 20-year-old Mercedes-Benz, not because he can't afford newer models, but because the car still functions, and replacing it would be wasteful. He monitors small expenditures in his personal life with the same intensity he applies to corporate budgets, treating every rupee as if his financial survival depends on it, despite having more money than he could spend in multiple lifetimes. But here's where Premji's story diverges from simple wealth hoarding. He's given away over $21 billion to charitable causes, primarily focused on education in India. That's roughly 7,000 lifetimes of Indian median earnings, donated while still flying economy and driving old cars. The frugality isn't about keeping wealth. It's about maximizing what wealth can accomplish by eliminating personal waste. Every dollar not spent on first-class tickets or luxury cars is a dollar that can fund schools, scholarships, and educational infrastructure. Flying economy is impressive until you see the billionaire who takes it further, eating lunch in the company cafeteria not as a publicity stunt, but as a daily routine for decades. 9. Cafeteria billionaire. Amancio Ortega built Zara into a global fashion empire worth over $80 billion, revolutionizing fast fashion and becoming one of the richest people in Europe. He eats lunch in the company cafeteria daily with employees who probably earn more per year than he spends on clothes. He sells luxury. He eats subsidized cafeteria food. Ortega's approach to wealth is almost invisibility through normalcy. He wears clothes from his own Zara stores, not custom-tailored designer pieces, but the same mass-produced items available to any customer. He's never given a lengthy media interview. He doesn't attend fashion shows or industry galas. For decades, the public didn't even know what he looked like because he avoided cameras so consistently that paparazzi struggled to get clear photos. The cafeteria lunches aren't stunts scheduled when journalists visit, they're routine. Ortega built Zara on operational efficiency, minimizing waste, optimizing supply chains, reducing costs wherever possible. And he applies the same logic to his personal life. Why pay for an executive dining room when the cafeteria serves adequate food at lower cost? The man who made fast fashion doesn't own a tuxedo. But Ortega's frugality reveals something deeper about his business philosophy. Zara succeeded by making fashion accessible and affordable, stripping away the premium pricing that traditional luxury brands relied on. Ortega living modestly isn't a contradiction, it's brand consistency. He built a fortune selling clothes to middle-class customers by understanding their priorities: style without extravagance, quality without premium pricing, fashion without pretension. His personal life mirrors his business model: functional, efficient, deliberately unglamorous. Factory floor frugality works in fashion. But the next billionaire lives in a town of 50,000 people and drives a pickup truck to the bank he owns. 8. Walmart's pickup truck. Jim Walton inherited a fortune from his father Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, and today sits on a net worth exceeding $70 billion. He lives in Bentonville, Arkansas, population roughly 50,000, and drives an old pickup truck around a town where his family's business is the largest employer and his name is on half the buildings. Sam Walton saved pennies. His kids saved the habit. Jim could live anywhere. Manhattan penthouses, Malibu Beach estates, London townhouses. Instead, he stayed in the same small Arkansas city where Walmart was founded, banking at Arvest Bank, which he chairs, and maintaining a lifestyle that looks more like a successful regional business owner than one of the richest individuals on earth. The pickup truck isn't a cost, it's what people in Bentonville drive. The modest home isn't a statement. It's what existed before the billions, and there was never a reason to change it. The Walton family embedded frugality so deeply into Walmart's culture that it became inseparable from their personal identities. Sam Walton famously drove a 1979 Ford F-150, lived in a ranch house, and wore clothes from his own stores. When he died in 1992, his children inherited not just billions, but the expectation that wealth wouldn't change behavior. Jim Walton honored that expectation by simply never leaving. Professional modesty isn't performance when everyone in town knows who you are and no one treats you differently. The Walton frugality serves a purpose beyond personal virtue. It reinforces Walmart's brand identity as the store for working-class Americans. Hard to sell everyday low prices when the owners are photographed on mega yachts. Walmart heirs staying in Arkansas makes geographic sense. But the next billionaire could live anywhere, chose Silicon Valley, and still cut his own hair to save $50. 7. The Professor Investor. David Cheriton is worth approximately $10 billion thanks to an early investment in Google. He and fellow Stanford professor Andreas von Bechtolsheim each wrote Larry Page and Sergey Brin a $100,000 check in 1998 that turned into one of the most successful venture bets in history. Cheriton still teaches at Stanford, still rides his bike to campus, and still cuts his own hair to avoid paying a barber. He turned $100K into $1 billion. Still won't pay $50 for a haircut. Cheriton drives a 2012 Honda, lives modestly, and maintains an academic lifestyle that hasn't changed despite venture capital returns that would let him buy the entire campus if he wanted. Students in his computer science classes have no idea they're being taught by someone whose net worth exceeds the university's endowment contributions from thousands of alumni combined. The self-cut hair isn't about the money, it's about the principle. Cheriton views paying for services he can perform himself as economically irrational, regardless of how much wealth he's accumulated. Time spent cutting his own hair is time not spent on something else. But for Cheriton, the inefficiency of paying someone else bothers him more than the opportunity cost of doing it himself. This is academic frugality meeting venture-scale wealth and refusing to reconcile the contradiction. Cheriton optimized his life for intellectual pursuit and minimal material distraction long before he had billions, and the billions didn't change the equation. $10 billion net worth. $0 spent on barbers since 2005. Academic frugality meets venture capital returns. But even that can't compare to the founder who turned cheap furniture into a religion and practiced what he preached until his death. 6. IKEA's eternal economy. Ingvar Kamprad founded IKEA and turned flat-pack furniture into a global empire worth tens of billions. He died in 2018, but his frugality became so legendary it remains IKEA's brand identity. He flew economy class exclusively. He drove a 1993 Volvo 240 for decades. He bought clothes at flea markets. And he furnished his home with IKEA products purchased on sale. IKEA's founder furnished his life the same way he furnished yours, cheaply. Kamprad didn't just practice frugality, He weaponized it as corporate culture. IKEA employees traveled economy, stayed in budget hotels, and were encouraged to find cost savings in every aspect of operations. The company's success was built on eliminating waste, and Kamprad embodied that principle so completely that stories of his penny pinching became part of IKEA's mythology. He famously haggled at flea markets despite being worth billions. He saved and reused gift wrapping paper. He would fly economy across continents, then take public transportation from the airport rather than paying for a taxi. The behavior wasn't performance, it was pathological consistency applied to every transaction, regardless of scale. He flew economy. The luggage was flat-packed. But Kamprad's frugality served a strategic purpose. IKEA's entire business model depended on convincing customers that cheap furniture wasn't inferior furniture. It was smart furniture. Having a billionaire founder who genuinely practiced what he preached made that message credible in ways marketing budgets couldn't buy. When Kamprad died, he left behind a fortune estimated at over $58 billion and a corporate culture where frugality wasn't a suggestion. It was commandment. IKEA made frugality a brand. But the next billionaire built a telecom empire and still lived in the same house for 4 decades without ever upgrading. 5. Modest telecom king. Carlos Slim built a telecommunications empire that made him the richest person in the world for multiple years, with a peak net worth exceeding $90 billion. He lived in the same modest house in Mexico City for over 40 years. No private jet, no yacht, no ostentatious displays of wealth that typically accompany telecom billionaire status. He wired Mexico, never rewired his lifestyle. Slim's home in the Lomas de Chapultepec neighborhood isn't a compound or estate. It's a comfortable but unremarkable house in an upscale area of Mexico City. He could have built a palace. He could have purchased a private island. Instead, he stayed in the same residence where he'd raised his children, long after his wealth eclipsed what most billionaires accumulate in lifetimes. His children were raised middle class by design. Slim deliberately shielded them from understanding the scale of family wealth, ensuring they developed work ethic and financial discipline before inheriting access to billions. They attended regular schools, lived without private security details during childhood, and only gradually learned that their father controlled significant portions of Mexico's economy. At his peak, Slim's net worth could have purchased every home in his upscale Mexico City neighborhood roughly 10,000 times over. He stayed in the one he'd always had. The frugality extended beyond housing. Slim drove himself rather than employing chauffeurs. He avoided the private jet lifestyle that most billionaires consider standard business infrastructure. His office was functional rather than opulent. The message was consistent. Wealth was for building businesses and creating value, not for personal consumption. Staying in one house is admirable until you meet the investor, who did the same thing but also happened to be Warren Buffett's business partner and intellectual equal. 4. The Pasadena Paradox. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime business partner and Berkshire Hathaway's vice chairman, died in November 2023, worth billions. He lived in a Pasadena home he'd purchased in the 1950s for what would now be around $300,000 adjusted for inflation. The house was comfortable but modest, located in a nice neighborhood, but nothing approaching the mansion-level real estate his wealth could have commanded. Buffett's partner made billions thinking about value, applied it to his address. Munger was famous for saying he was rich in the ways that count: intellectual curiosity, strong relationships, meaningful work. Material excess didn't factor into his definition of wealth. He drove modest cars, lived simply, and spent his time reading, thinking, and investing rather than managing properties or staff that luxury lifestyles require. The Pasadena house represented Munger's broader philosophy: optimize for what actually matters, eliminate everything else. Moving to Beverly Hills or a coastal mansion would have added commute time, property management headaches, and social obligations that distracted from what he valued. Thinking clearly about business and spending time with family, he could afford Beverly Hills. Choose Pasadena. Saved the commute. But Munger's frugality wasn't about denial. He spent on things he valued: books, education, experiences that expanded understanding. The restraint was selective, focused on eliminating status-signaling consumption that served no purpose beyond showing wealth he didn't need to prove. When Munger died at 99, he left behind a fortune in the billions and a legacy of rational living that influenced how thousands of investors think about wealth. The house in Pasadena, unchanged for decades, became a symbol of his philosophy. True wealth is freedom to think clearly, not square footage. That was quiet wealth in Pasadena. But the next billionaire made frugality visible, wearing the same outfit daily in front of billions of people as a statement about priorities. 3. Gray T-shirt empire. Mark Zuckerberg is worth over $170 billion. He wears the same gray T-shirt every day. The same style, purchased in bulk, eliminating clothing decisions entirely from his daily routine. For years, he drove an Acura TSX, then a Honda Fit, cars that cost less than the hourly appreciation of his Meta stock holdings. Decision fatigue is expensive. T-shirts are not. The gray T-shirt became iconic enough that it's now associated with Zuckerberg as much as Facebook itself. He explained the reasoning publicly. Reducing trivial decisions preserves mental energy for decisions that actually matter: product strategy, business operations, technical challenges. Steve Jobs did the same with his black turtleneck. Obama with his suit colors. The uniform eliminates choice, which eliminates distraction. But Zuckerberg's frugality extended beyond wardrobe. He lived in a modest Palo Alto rental for years before purchasing a home. And even then, the house was relatively unremarkable by Silicon Valley billionaire standards. No sprawling compound, no private amenities that signal extreme wealth. He famously drove an Acura, worth roughly $30,000, despite being worth tens of billions, upgrading only when the car physically deteriorated. The entire aesthetic signals something specific to tech founder culture. Intelligence and focus matter more than material display. Wearing expensive clothes or driving luxury cars sends the message that you care about status. Wearing the same T-shirt daily signals that you've optimized beyond caring what others think. Owns the same shirt 20 times. Still spent less on wardrobe than one Hermes tie, but there's calculation beneath the simplicity. Zuckerberg's frugal image benefits Meta's brand positioning. Facebook built its user base by being accessible, free, and unpretentious. Having a CEO who dresses like a college student reinforces that brand identity in ways that showing up to Congress in custom suits would undermine. The gray T-shirt isn't just personal preference. It's corporate messaging. Every photo of Zuckerberg in casual wear reminds people that Meta's founder hasn't lost touch with regular users, hasn't succumbed to Silicon Valley excess, and remains focused on product over perception. Of course, the image management only works because it's relatively authentic. Zuckerberg genuinely doesn't care about luxury goods. The frugality isn't performance. It's just convenient that it photographs well. Wearing the same shirt signals focus. But the next billionaire took it to the extreme that shocked even Silicon Valley, claiming to own no homes while running companies worth trillions. 2. The homeless billionaire. In 2020, Elon Musk, at various points the richest person on Earth with a net worth exceeding $200 billion, announced he was selling all his real estate and would own no house. Over the following months, he liquidated approximately $100 million in residential properties across California, fulfilling a promise that seemed absurd even by Silicon Valley standards. No homes, just Mars ambitions. Musk claimed to be renting a $50,000 prefabricated house near SpaceX headquarters in Texas, a boxable casita, roughly 375 square feet, the kind of modular housing designed for disaster relief and affordable housing projects. The richest person on Earth, living in conditions that most college students would consider a downgrade. The narrative was perfect for Musk's personal brand. Radical commitment to mission over materialism, willingness to sacrifice comfort for progress, and a lifestyle so austere it made other billionaire frugality look like indulgence. No mansions meant no distractions, no property management, no maintenance staff, just focus on Tesla, SpaceX, and the various other ventures consuming his attention. Sold $100 million in real estate to rent a box near the rocket factory. The efficiency is very Elon. But the reality was more complicated than the image. Musk reportedly spent time at other properties belonging to friends and associates, including extended stays at homes owned by people in his professional network. The homeless billionaire narrative was technically true. He didn't own residential real estate, but the lived experience was less ascetic than the story suggested. Still, the symbolism mattered more than the specifics. By divesting from real estate, Musk made a visible statement about capital allocation. Every dollar tied up in houses was a dollar not funding rockets, electric vehicles, or neural interfaces. The frugality wasn't about denying himself comfort. It was about channeling resources toward ventures he considered more important than personal real estate portfolios. This is where Musk's approach diverges from traditional billionaire frugality. Warren Buffett lives modestly because he values simplicity. Ingvar Kamprad pinched pennies because waste offended him philosophically. Musk sold his houses because real estate is capital sitting idle when it could be building infrastructure for Mars colonization.
The $50,000 rental represents the minimum viable housing for someone whose actual priority is spending 80+ hours per week at factories and launch sites. It's not frugality, it's radical prioritization taken to a logical extreme. Owning no real estate is radical. But it's theater compared to the billionaire who's lived in the same modest house since 1958, eats McDonald's for breakfast, and raised children who didn't know they were rich until they were teenagers. Because at the top of this list, frugality isn't performance, it's philosophy.
1. Omaha's eternal house. Warren Buffett is worth approximately $130 billion. He lives in a house in Omaha, Nebraska that he purchased in 1958 for $31,500. The same house for over 65 years, while his net worth compounded from thousands to hundreds of billions, while he became one of the most successful investors in human history, while Berkshire Hathaway grew into a conglomerate worth nearly $1 trillion, Buffett stayed in the same modest gray stucco house in a middle-class Omaha neighborhood. The house appreciated. Buffett appreciated faster. The property is now worth roughly $1.4 million based on comparable sales in the area. A solid return on a $31,500 investment, but utterly meaningless relative to Buffett's wealth. The house represents approximately 0.001% of his net worth. He could buy every home on his block, demolish them, and build whatever he wanted without the expenditure registering as material to his finances. He doesn't. Because the house works. It has bedrooms, bathrooms, a kitchen. It's close to the Berkshire Hathaway office, a short drive that hasn't required moving closer despite decades of commuting. The neighborhood is quiet, familiar, and lacks the pretension that comes with wealthy enclaves, where every interaction becomes a subtle negotiation of status. Buffett's lifestyle extends beyond just housing. He's famous for eating McDonald's breakfast, typically a $3.17 meal consisting of sausage, egg, and cheese biscuits. His net worth increases by roughly $3.17 every 0.0008 seconds based on average annual returns, meaning he earns the cost of his breakfast faster than he can finish ordering it. He drives modest cars, typically Cadillacs or other American sedans that are comfortable but nowhere near luxury vehicles his wealth could justify. He wears suits bought off the rack, not custom-tailored. He eats McDonald's breakfast. The meal costs $3.17. His net worth increases $3.17 every 0.0008 seconds. But here's where Buffett's frugality becomes most interesting. His children didn't know the family was wealthy until they were teenagers. Buffett deliberately shielded them from understanding the scale of family resources, ensuring they developed normal relationships with money before inheriting access to billions. They attended public schools, lived in the same house as their father, and only gradually learned that their dad wasn't just successful. He was running one of the most valuable companies on earth. This wasn't accidental. Buffett has spoken extensively about the dangers of inherited wealth and the importance of children developing their own sense of purpose and work ethic, independent of family money.
By living modestly and treating wealth as a tool for compounding rather than consuming, he created an environment where his children's identities weren't shaped by material excess. The $31,500 house purchase in 1958 equals roughly $340,000 in inflation-adjusted dollars today. The home's current market value of approximately $1.4 million represents a 4.5x return adjusted for inflation, respectable for real estate, catastrophically poor compared to Berkshire Hathaway stock, which has compounded at roughly 20% annually over the same period.
If Buffett had taken that $31,500 and invested it in Berkshire instead of buying the house, it would be worth tens of millions today. But he needed somewhere to live. And the house served that purpose then and continues to serve it now. Buffett's philosophy on housing is consistent with his approach to all consumption. Spend on things that provide value. Eliminate everything that doesn't. A bigger house wouldn't make him happier. A fancier car wouldn't improve his commute. Designer clothes wouldn't make his suits more functional. Every dollar spent on unnecessary luxury is a dollar not compounding. And compounding is what Buffett does better than almost anyone in history. This is where his frugality diverges from deprivation. Buffett doesn't deny himself things he values. He spends on books, on time with family and friends, on experiences that matter to him. He's hosted events, traveled, and lived a rich life by any measure that doesn't involve square footage or vehicle price tags. The restraint is selective, targeting only the consumption that wealthy people engage in to signal status rather than derive actual utility. Professional modesty isn't about suffering, it's about clarity. The house in Omaha has become symbolic of Buffett's entire investment philosophy. He didn't chase trends. He didn't overcomplicate things. He found what worked: value investing, long-term compounding, patient capital allocation, and stuck with it for decades despite market fashions changing around him. The house is the physical manifestation of that approach. It worked in 1958. It works now. And changing it would be an optimization theater that serves ego rather than function. But there's another layer to Buffett's housing choice that matters in the context of his public image. Berkshire Hathaway's success depends partly on trust. Investors have to believe that Buffett is managing their capital prudently, without conflicts of interest or excessive self-dealing. Living in a modest house in Nebraska rather than a Manhattan penthouse or Beverly Hills estate sends a powerful signal. He's managing shareholder money the same way he manages his own, with discipline and restraint. If Buffett lived in a $100 million mansion while preaching the virtues of value investing and long-term thinking, the contradiction would undermine his credibility. The Omaha house is proof that he practices what he preaches, that his investment philosophy extends to every financial decision, including the most personal ones. And then there's the philanthropic dimension. Buffett has pledged to give away 99% of his wealth, primarily through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and his children's charitable foundations. Living modestly while accumulating billions to give away creates a narrative consistency. The money was never for him. It was always meant to compound, and eventually fund causes larger than personal consumption. The $130 billion net worth represents not personal spending power, but future philanthropic capacity. The house in Omaha is where the custodian of that capital happens to sleep between managing it. When Buffett eventually dies, the house will likely be sold or preserved as a historical site, worth a tiny fraction of the wealth he accumulated while living there. It will stand as a monument to the idea that at the highest levels of wealth creation, lifestyle inflation is optional, that you can compound billions without ever feeling the need to prove it through consumption. The extremely rich billionaire who lives like he's poor isn't denying himself anything meaningful. He's just refused to confuse net worth with lifestyle, refused to let wealth change the fundamentals of a life that worked before the billions and still works after them. The house cost $31,500 in 1958. It's worth maybe $1.4 million today. Buffett is worth $130 billion. And he's still there.